Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to memoQ Talks. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I'll be the host for this episode of memoQ Talks. Today, we're being joined by Adam Asnes, who's the CEO of Lingoport, and we're going to be talking about something that I have no expertise or knowledge about, which is software localization, as opposed to just regular old localization. We're going to talk about what it is and what are some of the best practices related to software localization, and we're going to drill down on quality specifically. But first off, let me welcome our guest. Adam, how are you?
I'm great. Nice to be with you this morning.
Yeah, I like about both of our backgrounds. Yours is much brighter, so like that. We have no idea where we are. I'm out in this Seattle Bellevue area. You could be in a restaurant in Japan for all. I mean, I doubt that's where you are. Where are you?
I'm in Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder's an awesome city. I used to spend summers out there when I was a little kid. My aunt had a place out there somewhere near Arapahoe or something. House with a pool. Great place to spend summers. How's it out this time of year?
Well, we've had a really gorgeous summer, and it's ending. The colors are all out in the mountains, which is cool. I say colors, mostly gold, but the aspen are just really gorgeous, and it's very nice. I mean, today fall has arrived today, but it's not that cold. So
Great. I remember there was a lookout drive. You could be in Boulder, which is relatively flat, and then you drive up this mountain, and right outside of town, and like 15 minutes later, you're just looking out and have this amazing view. Do you happen to know what that place is?
You're probably thinking of like Flagstaff Mountain, or that's a really common for visitors to go up there because there's a nice road out of town there, or up Boulder Canyon, or any of the canyons around here.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm sure it's probably Flagstaff because you've got lots of turnouts and great views and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's not truly flat, but it's relatively flat compared to just west. So it's really kind of weird. It's like you have the plains, or the Great Plains across the United States kind of begin, and then only 25 miles from here you get the Continental Divide. So it goes up pretty quickly. It's sort of like it's the hockey stick. It's the hockey stick that everybody wants on their sales results. Basically, is what our democracy looks like.
It's the world's largest speed bump, huh? It's just
right.
Wait, I mean, you've been at Lingoport for forever? I mean, since the beginning,
I started on the kitchen table in 2001. So yeah.
That's
I had more hair back then.
We all did. And different shades of color and stuff. But hey, so before we get into the specifics of the topic of the show, which is software localization, could you just give us a quick soundbite in terms of what Lingoport does, and then we'll come back to software localization and kind of weave back and forth in that.
Sure. We are a whole suite of software that supports continuous internationalization and localization that large development-oriented enterprises uses. So most of our customers are, an awful lot of them you've heard of, plenty that you haven't, but they are technology-focused companies. They range from medical products, medical device companies, up through, darling internet social networks, really wide variety of types of customers, but what they all have in common is technology plays some pivotal role, and that technology needs to be made ready for their global customers in every little sprint and release. The other thing we do and this is really how the company cut its teeth, is that people will hire us for consulting and sometimes actually internationalize their applications. So a company will come to us and say, hey, we've never been in another language before, but our software is not really constructed to support multiple locales. Can you help us? And yeah, we can. Everything from giving a lot of architectural direction to actually fingers on keyboards and making the changes to their code base so that their developers can work in parallel on new features.
Okay, so that actually leads very nicely into the
Yeah.
next question because, you mentioned the software
Mhm.
and helping them to internationalize that. I'm familiar with translation. I kind of,
Right.
I've been in the
Right.
industry off and on for 10 plus years. It's pretty straightforward. And I've been involved with some software projects where we actually just translated the help files. And
Wow.
I thought that was software localization. Explain to
Right.
me what's the difference between just what I understand and what is real software localization?
Okay. Well, consider that software is there's the presentation layer, which you see the words that need to be translated. That's kind of obvious to everybody, right? Um, but there's the second layer, like what software does is it always processes stuff. So, you enter in information either, individually as users, or it's sucking in information from a database. That information has to be handled so it supports character sets, perhaps different word orders, date time formats are going to be different, numerical units are going to be different, time zone. This whole long list of things that are different depending upon where you are. The other thing is that's not really automatic. Let's say you have your software in 8 languages, right? So you have to have what's called a locale mechanism, and that has to be in all the different layers of your software that matter. So you might have like your JavaScript presentation layer in this section, and then your database over here, and some backend Java or even C++ over here. All of them have to handle what's called locale. So locale is language is one of the things,
Hmm.
but there are regional differences. And so the proper language has to be, when I'm as a user, say I'm going to pick on the UK, right?
Okay.
So I'm in the UK and I want
I
UK.
like picking on the UK, just
Yeah,
in
good.
general.
All
Just,
right.
yeah.
So I want UK. I say that, I'm in good old London town, right? And I prefer to have UK as my locale, right?
Hmm.
Um, I choose locate. Let's say, first of all, there's the level of the browser automatically selecting, but that's really not so great. You also want users to be able to select because I could be French, from France, and traveling in the United States. I might still want to interact as if, I might still want to see French. So in any case, the whole issue of locale is language, and all the other formats have to work right. So when I'm in the UK, I want the UK, I want British English, right?
Right.
And you know, you might want the metric system. I don't know. There's some stalwarts that might want something else. Is
Well, then in the
the case.
UK, they actually have
Yeah,
both, right? And they have
right,
things called
right. They're
stones
all
and
confused.
pounds and
I
hands and
mean, metrics is going to be standard, but even like in
yeah,
some accounts, like the comma and the period are used differently.
sure.
The number separators are different. All kinds of things could get you messed up. So internationalization is the very first step, and if you don't internationalize, you're not really going to end up with a good localized product. In like the really bad old days, and I'm talking about like the 90s, people would actually create a second version of their product. They'd be like, oh, we need to support Japanese. We have this big customer, right? They would actually create a second version of their product. And then now they had a fork in their development, and they couldn't just work on one piece. If they worked on one, the
I work
English
on both.
software, it
Yeah.
wasn't in the Japanese software. They had to go back and do both. It's not scalable, right? So that's the bad old days. There were other reasons there too, like not incomplete adaptation of Unicode. But um, now, when you have an internationalized system, you have one piece of software that can be configured to work anywhere with all your locale preferences, and maybe even behavioral preferences. Your setup might be different for different locales, just based
So
on preferences.
are you
Yeah,
going in at the code level then?
yeah, yeah,
Okay. Okay. So
yeah,
this goes way beyond just translation. I mean, you're
yeah,
actually
yeah.
going in and helping them advise at the code level. Like, here are some things that you're going to need to, some modules that you're going to need to plug in or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's never that easy, but yeah. Yeah,
Why
I
not?
mean, yeah,
Good call.
as a company, like one of the differences between us and other localization technology and service providers is most everything we do is at the software repository level. That is where code is stored, the systems of how different developers check in and out code and submit it back to the repository. I mean, for somebody non-technical, I would say the best analogy would be like working in Google Docs, where you have a central document that's in a repository and different people have access to that document and could edit it. Well, our stuff will real time as they're editing it, check for internationalization issues. And on the localization side, it also say, oh, you've added a string to this resource file, and suck it out and send it over to memoQ or other resources. Um,
There's
for
no
tr-
other
for
resources.
tra-
It's only memoQ.
okay, so only to memoQ, right? In this universe, it's only memoQ that exists. The translator works
This
on
is
it.
memoQ talks. Okay, so
Right,
just
right, right,
joking.
right. And when the translator is done, it's automatically picked up and placed back in the software repository, and that saves a whole lot of work. And it also has the developer work at a cadence that they're used to. On the developer level, there's been a very significant revolution in the last, it's actually been taking place since the early 90s, but really picked up steam around the mass adaptation of agile development,
Mhm.
which is DevOps and continuously applying quality practices and quality reviews and automation to the daily grind of how a developer works. So um, prior to that, when people talk about waterfall, the reason why they talk about waterfall is like everything was done one step at a time. You developed a whole lot of code, maybe your developer unit tested it, but then it didn't go into formal QA until the very end. And you might have 1 to 2 releases a year, right? And so internationalization might be baked into that. Localization happened at the very end, or maybe even 4 months after the very end, right? Now it's just constant, and you don't have the idea of one big gateway release typically, or you have lots of middle releases, continuous improvement, and it's really delightful for the user because they're like using whatever your product is, and it's like, oh, this new feature showed up, right? That's kind of very cool. And sometimes people get upset, like, wait, my UI changed, right? But they get used to it like people are more and more used to that as things change. But that presents real challenges to the localization industry. And the localization industry in general has been, kind of slow to adapt to this repo focused. And I get it. When it comes to software, the strings or the words in an application aren't exactly where all the words are. There's many more words in a help file, and many more words after that in a website or a PDF or a large document. Um, that's where the words are, right? But software has its own particular practices and requirements that's us.
Right.
That's our niche. It's always been our niche. It's kind of what we're into.
So, okay, that gives
And
a very good overview of what internationalization, internationalization is and means and how it's kind of evolved.
right.
What would you say are like some must-have best practices? I'm a technology company. We have this super new, cool, could be a widget, but it requires some software to run that widget. And we're going to sell that widget into 20 different countries. What are some must-have best practices that I need to be kind of including into my workflows or the processes?
So it's really automation, and also automation. There are systems now that really take the human component out of a lot of traditional software work around localization. So first of all, I'm going to toot our own horn. Our software will check as the developer is writing code. It will check if they've created an internationalization problem. So, like there's some very simple things like don't embed a string, right? Because if it's embedded, the translator can't get to it. If it's
Right.
embedded in code and not a resource file of some type. Um, don't don't concatenate. So concatenation is literally one of the first lessons you get when you're a software developer. There's like that famous hello world. You write a little application called hello world, might do like hello and then that's the string, and world is another string, and you might put it, like they both get put together, right? That's bad because word order is often different in different places. So if you have, like, say, I have 5 apples, and you're building that string programmatically where, we say, hey, Mark has 5 apples. Mark is inserted as, username. Has is, inserted. Then 5 is inserted, and then apples is inserted. They're all sort of variables, string. Um, that's bad because the word order is going to be different in different languages. So you have to manage that. If you're using, let's say, a calendar class, um, and that calendar class isn't passed the locale information, then it might not behave the way you want it to. And suddenly you have a date time format, let's say in US format, which, hardly anybody else uses, and you're in trouble. So those are the kinds of things that are very easy for our software to check as the developer is working. So don't wait until testing. Like, people will test and do this thing called pseudo localization, and like that's the be all end all. But I'm not saying, like, we actually facilitate pseudo localization. You should pseudo localize, but the reality is anything you find that late in the process means that you have to file a bug in, let's say, Jira or whatever your bug tracking system is. Somebody has to review that bug, assign that bug. A developer who is doing something else has to stop what they're doing, go open that, repo, look for that issue, fix it, test it, run it through the testing cycle again, and put it back. That is way less efficient than, hey, I'm a developer. I'm either going along as I write, and before I submit my code into the repository, I just check it, right? And I'm not supposed to do that. So, it takes me like 2 seconds to fix it, right? And it never gets filed as a bug. That's the idea. Or, hey, this showed up in a code, what's called a pull request for code review. And the developers, usually this is a really good development practice. You have often developers working in pairs or in teams, and they review one another's code. The idea is to find those issues before they get committed and found in test. Same idea, right? So by supporting that with flagging internationalization issues, you find that really early. And then the second thing is, you really don't want developers or localization engineers having to fish for files. We joke that, like, don't turn your developers into file nannies. Say, okay, well, first of all, you got to know that, like, developers are really, development projects are really fragmented now. You might have 20 or 40 different teams on a really big product, right? And they're all working in parallel, but at different speeds, right? So as they work, and then multiply this over a large organization, you've got, let's say, thousands of software products in some cases. It gets really ugly. So if somebody has to go in and say, oh, let me do a diff, let me look at the differences between files, see what needs to be translated. Even if you've got scripts to do that, somebody has to remember to do it. Somebody has to manually make a file handoff. As you know, if, let's say, you're going into 8 languages, those files don't come back at the same time. And
Mhm.
somebody has to sort of sequence them and put them back. It's like kind of no wonder that a lot of software localization, they may call it agile, but it almost runs counter to agile because, teams will say, oh, well, we're only going to do localized updates like 4 times a year because it's such a hassle, right?
Right.
So, that's a whole other conversation,
Who cares about our customers in Japan? They'll be okay.
Yeah. It's like we'll treat them like a second class customer, and
Right.
we'll get to them later, and everybody else gets the latest update. Boom, 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 right? So the idea is the closer you can, the more you can automate. So you take all the busy work out of localization. This is just like a developer adds a string, poof, it shows up, it gets passed to memoQ. Somebody can get assigned to translate it, or maybe you run machine translation the first time around, it comes back, and boom, you're always localized, right? Is the idea. You're
So
never falling behind.
so what I'm
Yeah.
hearing is that automation is important.
It's really important, and in fact, developers expect it.
Yeah.
It's only in the globalization department do they act like, oh, this is going to be a problem, and some of that is because there is a natural kind of a difficulty, a tension between localization and development, and that makes sense. Consider that development is feature focused. They are really bonused. They are rated on how good a developer are you
Hmm.
and how fast you get this feature out. So they're always under this under the gun, really. Like you've got 2 weeks to produce this well-defined piece of work. It could be 3 days, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 3 weeks. It depends on the organization. But because that is really well-defined and quite finite, they're going to fight back against anything that changes their scope, right? So if
Right.
you don't automate and you tell them like, you got to send me your localization files. Oh, and there are these bugs that showed up after I localized. They're going to be like, go away because I have these features to produce. I mean, it's not like they're bad
Right.
people and they don't care about localization. It's literally what they're being, kind of pushed in the direction of doing, right? And the other thing is like, if you think about like the way a developer thinks, they will like a very good creative developer will think about new features that they could come up with and implement on the weekend, like they're in the
Right.
shower or, they're doing their washing up and they're like, get it out hot. And they will sit there and they will start to, kind of plan it out. Maybe on a whiteboard or actually, create a prototype over the weekend, right? There has never, there's maybe one, right? There's never been a developer who had that aha moment on their own time on the weekend about internationalization and localization. It just like it doesn't happen, right?
Well, that's what
So
you do.
that is what we do. But in
That's how
our
you spend your
context,
time in the shower.
right. Well, but in our context, that's functionality. That's really cool,
Right.
right?
Right.
So localization has this kind of face off with or demand from development, and the more that localization can take development out of the localization based business, make it fluid, make it easy to follow. Um, it actually is this really nice positive reinforcement that we see in our customers because now the developers are like, okay, well, this helped me. And, you know, look at that. We're in 8 languages and I don't have to juggle files and I don't have to go
Right.
back and fix this stuff because it's already handled, right? It's all automated, right? And it's as fast as I go. Like as a developer, you don't want to be waiting for localization. And in many cases, in many organizations, the developers are actually waiting on localization to be, they've moved off into another area by the time localization gets complete. So if there's anything they have to go back on, they have to stop what they're doing and go back. And that's why, sometimes companies hire us to fix their like backlog of localization bugs.
Right.
And the reason why they sometimes they exist for 10 years because nobody is willing to go back because they don't know where the bug is. You
Right.
know, it's really not clear. And to go back is hard. Of course, we have software that analyzes the code and finds the bug, so that kind of helps us do it. But in any case,
Okay, I'm just going to ask you a couple more questions.
yeah, I can wax
Can you?
euphoric on this all day. So
What an amazing
cut me
conversation that
off.
would be. So, um, I just have this visualization of your wife pounding on the door. Get out of the shower! You're in there dreaming up the next the next feature. Let me ask you. I mean, obviously, over these, how many years is it? 20 years?
Yeah, yeah,
20 years.
yeah.
You've
I can't
seen
believe
some crazy, complex problems or projects. Can you describe one of the most challenging, projects that you were involved with, and the type of solution that you were able
All
to
right.
develop?
Sure. The biggest problems are actually people problems. Um, the technology problems tend to be pretty solvable with time and attention. I will say that getting people to embrace a different workflow is maybe the hardest thing. Like, for instance, we have this really cool QA product. We just came out with it earlier this year, right? Localizer QA. And it lets people, instead of relying, like when you do a linguistic review of the application right now, you might
Mhm.
actually do it in memoQ where you have like source and target. Somebody goes over. Now, I don't like this translation, but they're actually reviewing it not in the application. So if you want to do true linguistic review, you do it in the context of the application. Well,
Sure.
the normal way that that's done is somebody goes to a screen. Let's say there's this new feature and they have directions, and they go to the screen and they run through these 5 screens or whatever. And if there's a word they don't like, they take a screenshot of it, circle the word they don't like, maybe file a bug with this suggested change. They file it Jira or whatever they're using, and that gets reviewed by somebody, and then somebody decides, yeah, I'm going to change it to this, and somebody has to go in and actually change the string, find the file that it came from, which is not obvious because you can have the same string used in like 12 different screens or 120 different screens, but it can happen all the time, right? So you have to, like, where is the context of that? Where does it occur in the code? It's not always obvious, right?
Mhm.
Often it's not obvious. So somebody has to take time to fix that, submit it, gets merged into the code, somebody reviews it. There's like 20 some odd steps. We had a customer break down all the steps that they had. It was like very eye opening. That goes into making a simple correction of, I saw this in the context and I didn't like this word and I want to change it to that, right? So Localizer QA actually lets you got to remember, our suite is in the repository. So we can track back to where things are. So we have this very cool thing called Localizer QA, which is really, I got to hand it to our development team. It's quite brilliant. It's not a very clean problem to solve, but it tracks back exactly where the string is. And so you can click on the string and you can enter in, there's a UI that comes up in Localizer QA, and you enter in, like, here's the string, here's what I want to change it to, and submit it for approval. And then, you don't necessarily want to take the editor's word for
Right.
it. You might want to have somebody check it. Somebody checks it, and it keeps a record of all that and everything like that. But when it's approved, it's done. There's
Wow.
no filing it in Jira. There's no screenshots. There's no nothing, right? So you have basically 3 steps. Go through, find the string, correct it, submit it for approval. 4 steps. Somebody accepts, the change, right? And
The
you're done.
approval person, the person who's approving it, they get to review it in context as well?
Yes. Yes.
Very cool. Yeah.
So that is really cool, fast technology. But if people like, I can't tell you how many times I have the conversation where people say, "Yeah, but where's the screenshot?" Take a screenshot if you want to, but there's no need for the screen. For me, it's frustrating.
I like my
For,
screenshots,
right,
That's
well, that's what it's like. It's
I've
really
got a
kind of
whole
funny.
folder over here. It's just filled with screenshots.
Right.
What's going to happen with that folder, man?
So, so, so
Uh,
I'm a tech guy. So I dig new ideas. I dig productivity. So I would say the hardest thing is that not everybody's wired like that, right? And
yeah.
so you see that organizationally also, it's hard for a large enterprise to pivot to a new process with different vendors and personnel and everything. Like, they're trained up on this old process. Who cares that it's inefficient? Now I got to train them on stuff. I have this really funny cartoon. It's like these cavemen, and they're pushing a square wheel, and somebody's standing by with round wheels. And it's like, "Hey guys, how about this?" And they're like, "We're too busy. Leave us alone."
That's funny.
You know? So so there's lots of parallels to that. Sometimes it's on an internationalization project. Um, there are cases where teams want to develop their own way of managing localization, their very own custom way, and they are hell bent on that. And I'll say, or my team,
On reinventing the wheel.
exactly. And I'll say, you realize that you can do this, and you're going to spend a lot of time doing this. It may not scale across your organization. Number one, I know that it's not going to. Like, I'll see companies say, "We're going to put all streams for all of our products in one repo." And I'm like, why would you do that? That's such an overhead, right? Um, so those are the kinds of things that people do. And the other thing that I'll say to them is, now you're not going to integrate well with the rest of the vendor universe. And that's bad. Because,
Hmm.
who's going to translate this stuff? Are you going to translate this stuff? Probably not, right? So how you play in the world is really important. Getting the message that you don't have to reinvent things, automate everything. Those are the challenges. Those are the things that our industry is really on a crossroads for. It's been happening for a few years. That's in like really high gear right now. Like, um, if
Well, that's
people can,
interesting.
yeah,
I actually just sorry,
yeah,
definitely leads into the next question, and
good,
which is, you know, what are the next trends? I mean,
okay,
everybody's using the repositories now, GitHub
uh-huh.
and everything.
Right, right,
That's and we're doing agile. It's no more waterfall. So that's happening. That's real.
okay. So
What's next?
So there's there's several technologies coming together right now, and all of this goes back to like there's like this triangle that people use for analogies, like uh, quality or good,
Right.
speed or quick, and cost or
Mhm.
value or cheap, right? Right, right. And
You
people
can
say,
you
"Oh,
can you can have two, but you can't have three, right? That's
well,
what
that's a lie."
the
Okay, I'm here to say that it's a lie that you can't have three. All of technology advancement is about closing the gap or making that triangle smaller.
Mhm.
That's what technology, that's what advancements are about. It doesn't come free, obviously. You probably weigh two of the things stronger than the others, you know. But for instance, the reality that uh, neural machine translation (NMT) is now approaching really a usable level of quality for many things. That is a big shaker. All the stuff that we do in the repo to automate, the code creation and the localization and plugging into the translator universe through, say, through memoQ, uh, also with NMT in place. And then finally, the QA side. The QA side is like super important. Like, my view of the trend on software localization, this probably goes for documents and others, is that actually the QA side is the fulcrum. If you can make QA fast and easy, that reflects everything upstream. Because think
Mm-hmm.
about it right now. You have this system that we call agile localization. And what we've done is we've sped everything up. You still have issues like minimum translation costs, and the fact that, like, as software is developed, often the streams aren't finalized till late in a sprint, right? So there's actually an incentive to wait till late in the sprint, which runs counter to how agile works. So what you actually have, if you really think about it, is what the industry calls agile localization. Actually, um, a lot of automation, which is cool, but it's still, you're localizing little bits at a time, but it's still sort of like this mini waterfall process at the end of a sprint. If it was truly agile, it'd be constant, right? The clinic would
That's
always
right.
be turning. And uh, to me, the feedback loop of QA would allow you to use, you know, do it through memoQ for all I care, right? But you could apply machine translation right away. So day one, developer of a sprint, developer adds a string, it's translated right away. And testing can begin day one instead of waiting to the very end to test for localization. Day one, you could be testing. You could do that, right? And I see
Yep.
that as the future of how all of this will be done, and why I'm so high on QA in particular. Lingoport's not going to go into the TMS business. That's pretty well established. But the QA, as it relates to software, is not. That is still an awful process, and it leverages so much agility up front if your QA is clean and easy. That I'm very excited about it. The industry has to believe it. We only have a few customers for that localizer QA product right now, but I believe in it very, very deeply. We even have like a cheapo GitHub version that automatically pipes strings into just raw machine translation, and then you just clean it up later if you want. That's in the GitHub marketplace. It's not the enterprise version, obviously. The enterprise version is a lot more care and feeding, a lot more attention to localization quality. So,
Excellent.
yeah, yeah,
Thank you for that. The
yeah.
last, probably last question here is for listeners or viewers who want to learn more about software localization, or organizations that want to learn more.
Mhm.
What advice would you give them?
Well, specifically for software, I'm going to Lingoport has a pretty extensive resources page. You can go to lingoport.com. Our blog is also active. We try to have something new up there, sometimes more than once a week, but usually not. But we look to always have relevant information, and we run a nearly monthly webinar series. We have a webinar just coming up on October 5th or 6th, where we're going to be talking about actually the marketing side of all of this. Like, you can do everything right localizing, but still be a flop in these markets, and I have a marketing expert on, but often we have technology experts and the like. So tune in to lingoport.com for webinars. That's a good place to start. And resources, white papers. It's a very deep site in terms of content recording. The Unicode Consortium is a really good resource. And of course, multilingual.com is also really good. Really nice revitalization of Multilingual magazine with Nimsy
Great.
taking over ownership there. I'm seeing a lot of really good relevant articles getting pushed. I just read a really good one on QA because I'm trying to soak up everything on QA that Tucker Johnson wrote. Really good post. So those are all good. Join Women in Localization. I'm proof you don't have to be a woman to be a member. They're always offering really good supportive information. They just had a lunch and learn yesterday on the interviewing process, and they often have local groups that get together for coffee or lunch or even dinner, and that's really fun to meet some of your industry colleagues.
That's some excellent advice. Well, hey, Adam, I
Yeah.
got to say, I really love talking to somebody who's a subject matter expert and who's passionate about
Oh,
their
thanks.
area of expertise, and that clearly, shines through with you. I mean, as you said, you could probably wax on for much more time, but this has been very, very informative, and really appreciate you and your time, and thank you so much.
Thanks for the platform, Mark. I love getting to talk. Thanks for the compliments, but there's definitely smarter people at Lingoport than I am. I'm just
So they
about
say
me.
your number one job is to hire smart people, right?
Right, right.
It's
All
good.
right.
Well,
Well,
hey, you have a
take
great
care.
rest of 2021. Take care. Cheers.
All
Bye.
right.
Thank you for joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.